Colorado is racing towards its worst COVID-19 hospitalization numbers yet, predicted to be about 2 weeks away, as 1 in 200 Coloradans is currently contagious. Businesses brace for whatever you call this, the third wave or another level of the first wave that we never rode out completely. We do find encouragement to end this week in your continuing generosity. You've raised 6 digits for people who lost their homes to wildfires. And we were trying to do a very serious interview for this very serious news show when the unicorn kept appearing. But it actually kind of works, because this is next. 6 months ago, I sat here, you sat there, and we talked about making a plan for the coming consequences of COVID-19, preparing to hunker down at home for the most part, taking smart precautions when we were out and around. We know a lot more about the virus now than we knew then, but not enough to stop it. So, it's time again.
Denver will be moved backwards to the state's dial, on the state's dial system, to safer at home level 3.
Back to level 3 goes Denver. Reduced capacity at restaurants and churches, a 25-person limit on indoor events, 75 people outdoors. Adams, Arapahoe, Otero, and Crowley counties also announced a tightening of restrictions in the last week. And Jeffco joined the club today. They have new capacity limits indoors and outdoors, a prohibition on fans at sporting events, and a move of last call back to 10 p.m. Our statewide numbers say that action was needed. 663 people are currently hospitalized in Colorado. We were at 448 a week ago. The state health department says we are going to pass the hospitalization peak that we saw back in April in the next 2 weeks. Our positivity rate is at nearly 9% today. Weekly average is almost 7.5%. And Colorado added 2,171 new cases of the virus in the last day. Brings our weekly average of new cases over 1,675 a day. The state models estimate that 1 in every 200 Coloradans is currently contagious with the virus. The St. Patrick's Day parade's already been canceled for next year, and CU Boulder students won't have a spring break. The bottom line is this: Coloradans' choices have put us in this position. Our choices can get us out of it. Let's look now at whether businesses have any kind of a better security net for this next wave of virus and the resulting restrictions we're already seeing. Here's Anusha Roy.
Or restaurant people, we're not going to go down without a fight.
Beth Gritch works with several Denver restaurants that were already operating at 25% capacity.
Honestly, 3 out of 4 of our restaurants were pretty much already at that because of the 6-foot distancing.
Outdoor seating helped, but we know what's in store for us weather-wise. So they're now dropping roughly $6,000 a tent.
We've been thinking about and talking about this since probably June or July, in all honesty. Knowing that we were going to head into these winter months and we were not going to be open and this was not going to be under control.
It's really your traditional kind of, favorite neighborhood gem that those are the ones that have been hit the hardest.
The Colorado Restaurant Association is working to spread the word about a grant that goes live Sunday. Restaurants can get anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000.
A grant program that we've been working with the governor's office on, where restaurateurs will be able to apply to help get those outdoor dining spaces funded.
The city of Denver is using CARES Act dollars for a similar grant, and that's how it's working right now, looking at state, local, and different sources for help. The head of the Colorado Enterprise Fund works with small businesses across Colorado and says it does feel fragmented, and from where they're sitting, they're worried about grant funding.
So going forward, what we're saying is that those are dwindling.
Loans are available, but it can be risky for some businesses already struggling.
So concerned with taking on debt because of the limited capacity that they're allowed to have. That debt's a concerning tool for them to take on. They just don't know if they're going to have sales tomorrow.
And in most cases, PPP money has already been spent, which means businesses are still in the pursuit of creative ways to make an income while keeping their ear to the ground about what help is available.
At first I thought she was still, but it turns out she was just frozen. So thank you, Anusha, even though you cannot hear us. We learned today that Colorado lost a prominent leader in law enforcement. Jim Davis is perhaps best known for disrupting an al-Qaeda terror plot that was being cooked up in Colorado. Davis was leading the FBI's Denver field office when they moved in on Najibullah Zazi before he could go to New York City to bomb the subway there. Davis also led the FBI team that processed Saddam Hussein after his capture. And Davis went on to lead Colorado's Department of Public Safety. I'm not going to lie. After you raised $525,000 for Colorado's wildfire evacuees last week, I wasn't real certain if everybody was just kind of going to be tapped out for this week's Word of Thanks microgiving campaign. But since Wednesday, you have now come up with another $127,000 to directly assist Coloradans who lost their homes and businesses in the fires. Text the word thanks to 303-871-1491 if you want to get in on that action. $127,000. That's crazy. We've set up this special fund for this week. It's going to be divided equally between the three long-term recovery funds. There's one in each of the three counties affected: Grand, Larimer, and Boulder. That way you don't have to choose between which Coloradans to help, and you don't have to make three separate donations. Last presidential election, Colorado trailed only Minnesota in turnout. They are nice, but we're better looking, and we should try to beat them this time. Politics guy Marshall Zellinger checks the numbers.
2.27 million of you in Colorado have returned your ballots as of last night. That's 54% of registered voters. 826,000 are unaffiliated, almost 790,000 are Democrats, and 634,000 are Republicans. But let's look at the numbers from a different perspective. Let's take the bars all the way to 100%. Of every unaffiliated voter in Colorado, so far only 47.5% have voted. Out of every registered Democrat, almost 64%. And out of every registered Republican, 56%.
The final 2-day window of an election in Colorado, about 35 or as much as 40% of the vote comes in on those 2 days.
David Flaherty of Magellan Strategies is a conservative-leaning pollster in Louisville. He'll be watching the returns for us on election night. In previous elections, Republicans tend to vote early. In this election, it appears more are holding on to their ballots longer. But Flaherty does not think it's about confusion between candidates.
I've never polled in my 15 years of polling Colorado, seen such a low number of undecided from the president, literally around 0 to 1%. The Senate race, 4% undecided. Just as a comparison, 4 years ago, it was in the mid-teens. There's a lot more undecided. So I don't believe it's indecision about making candidate choices, but they could be waiting on some of the statewide ballot choices, because there's some, of the 11 statewide and any local measures that are on the ballot, there's some ones that are not easy to understand.
Tell me about it. So when this is all over and we know the results, it'll be interesting to see why it ends up the way it ends up.
I'm very curious to see a correlation perhaps between seniors especially that support or wearing masks and they're very concerned about COVID and who they say they voted for.
I learned a very interesting statistic from David Flaherty. It deals with inactive voters, people who don't get ballots because maybe they didn't vote in the last election, or they've moved, or they have a bad address and their ballot in a previous election got returned, so they're deemed inactive and don't get a ballot unless they request one. He said so far 6,000 out of more than 400,000 have requested and returned ballots as inactive, now active voters. Normally it's 9%. Based on his math, we're at like 1.5%.
That's kind of interesting. You think with the wave of turnout. Okay, real quick for people who think they might be inactive for whatever reason, they don't have a ballot. It's not too late. You've got options.
You can contact your county clerk. I think there's a form you have to fill out, but you have to proactively reach out to your county clerk to be able to become active again and then get your ballots. By the way, Kyle, I noticed your 9-pin looks a little funny today. I don't know which way. It's this way.
Oh, which way? I'm looking side to side. No,
it's your sticker.
Yeah. No, I voted. It was fun. You should try it. It was really cool. All right, thank you, Marshall. Well, you have given us just this never-ending supply of election questions. We're trying to get to as many as possible. Ken on Twitter wanted to know who helps our seniors in assisted living communities vote, who assists with mail-in registration and understanding the ballot. If you do not get your mail from mailbox, county clerk hand delivers, which takes some coordination during COVID.
We actually have really great law in Colorado for what we call HCFs, healthcare facilities, that involves us sending bipartisan teams to those healthcare facilities to make sure that the seniors, if they don't have individual mailboxes, get those ballots, understand the information, and are able to get it back to us conveniently.
This is a unique year, however. With COVID, those facilities are not, it's not really a safe place for us to just come into. So we are facilitating that out. We're delivering the ballots to those folks and waiting outside in case they need us in any way.
So, Ken, there's your answer. Also, I forgot to thank Marshall, which is rude. My mother raised me better, and my mother watches this program online. So, thank you, Marshall. If you're looking to do some last-minute studying before you vote this weekend, Marshall's ballot initiative breakdown, for which we are thankful, as well as his answers to all of your frequently asked elections questions, have been compiled at 9news.com. Colorado's closely watched and quite contentious Senate race could end a long career in public service for one of the two men running. I mentioned that kind of offhand at the close of our recent Senate debate. Thought that it was timely to share it again here. We do a lot of these debates. I think it's rare for us to have a stage with so many combined years of public service to Colorado. On the off chance that one of your two careers in public service ends this November, we extend thanks on behalf of the people of Colorado for the many years that you have served this state. Despite the cynicism that exists today, there is still good to be done in public service, and both of you have been in the arena for a long time. So thank you very much.
We're familia, and for us it's really just that connection to support one another, especially during these troubling times.
It's been a violent year for some communities across America. There's a place on Colfax to honor those lost. Good old Uncle Sam has a simple request, and he's a tribute to the legacy of the man who built it. Next.
A beautiful way to end the work week. Wow, the sunshine felt so good today. Temperatures sitting in the upper 60s this afternoon, and we'll cool things off into the mid to upper 30s here in Denver. A little warmer across the plains and a cool night, but a clear night up in the mountains. We do have a cold front that will be racing into Colorado mid-morning tomorrow. It will help to cool us off just a bit, and also we'll be kicking up the winds. Out ahead of it late tonight, 40 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts going in and around the foothills up to the high country areas. And then as we head toward tomorrow afternoon, that northeasterly push helps to bring a bit of a breeze here to the metro area. I said temps were cooling off. We'll be in the upper 50s. And then if the kiddos are heading out tomorrow, numbers are going to be on the cooler side. Bundle up in those costumes. As we look ahead toward November, the sunshine is back and the heat's on. We'll be at 76 on Election Day.
It's a sign that Uncle Sam wants you to vote. You knew that. But there is a backstory with this sign in Lakewood. The owner, Cynthia Fite, says this was a creation made by her dad. He helped run elections for years down in Oklahoma. That Uncle Sam used to greet voters outside her father's polling place. Uncle Sam got passed down through the generations. Cynthia now brings him out for special occasions, like the 4th of July and the lead up to Election Day. It's a way to remember her dad and what he stood for.
It epitomizes my dad. He was one of those guys who did the right thing and said the right thing and, you know, spoke out when my mother wished he wouldn't. And this is just the kind of year that Uncle Sam's awfully important. He believed there were ways to compromise, there were ways to get along, that there was a way the country worked. And we've not been doing a good job.
Cynthia's dad would no doubt be especially proud of all the first-time voters out there. And we would love to hear from you too. There have to be at least a few first-time voters who are watching next. Now, I'm not talking about young people who are eligible to vote for the first time this year. That is great that you're getting involved. But we would love to spotlight and to celebrate some older first-time voters. So, are you one? Do you know of one? Is there one sitting across the room from you right now? I'm very serious. I would really like to share your story. There is no shame in it because you are part of the process now. And I think that sharing your story might convince a few more people to also go vote. So if you or somebody that you know is an older first-time voter, I really, really want to hear from you. Email next@9news.com. I promise I read every single email, and I'll be on special lookout for yours. A place to honor loved ones for communities fighting to make sure they're not forgotten.
We remember their names, we remember their lives.
A special Dia de los Muertos tribute. Before the Day of the Dead is Halloween, one day away, and it would appear somebody has their costume as they photobomb an interview on our show.
I feel like I need to take a minute to explain what just happened.
That explanation, next. People around the world will honor family and friends that they've lost on Dia de los Muertos. The center on Colfax has altars on display to honor members of the LGBTQ community, as well as those who've been killed by police. Photojournalist Mike Grady takes us down there.
Dia de los Muertos is actually a celebration that has its history in Mexico, honoring our ancestors, our loved ones who have passed away. The main reason that we have the altars is to make sure that our loved ones are not forgotten. The Center on Colfax created a very special altar this year, a special tribute to lives that have been lost at the acts of violence. And so we have Black Lives Matter altar, we have our transgender altar as well to honor our many trans siblings who actually have lost their lives at the hands of acts of violence. Sorry, I got a little emotional just by saying those words. You know, it's been so hard these past few months, you know, to have the altars for our trans siblings is to give them visibility, affirmation that they are part of our community and that we stand up with them. And they continue to be a part of our lives. That's why we celebrate Dia de los Muertos in their memory. So that way their legacy lives on. And that's why we celebrate Dia de los Muertos with them.
Our good news this week is a very serious interview via Zoom with a very unserious situation playing out in the background. That and your feedback next. It's Friday, so we can't say goodbye without sharing some of your good news. Well, today's good news is that one of the rarest and most majestic creatures to never exist has been spotted in Denver. Anusha was in the middle of a Zoom interview for a story today when a pretty white unicorn galloped through her apartment. That would be her husband, Mir, cantering through the kitchen in the unicorn onesie.
Alan, I know your video is not off, but see, my husband is in a virtual Halloween costume competition right now, and that is what you just saw.
What is his? Is he a bunny? As a rabbit?
He's a unicorn.
Unfortunately, he did not win the Halloween costume contest. Prize money would have covered the cost of the onesie and left him with $5. But now, in order to get his money's worth, we likely will see that majestic beast again. We have heard from 8 first-time voters in the last few minutes. I'm so encouraged to hear from those of you in the audience voting for the first time at an older age. Email me next at 9news.com. I really want to hear your story. David and Mandy write in to say, you keep saying between when referring to the 3 charities helping fire victims. Between is used when talking about 2 entities. Among is for more than 2. That is why I adore you people. Like, you're always teaching me things. I should have known that, but I know it now. I'll see you next time.